You're listening to The Watchers. I hated that. You're listening to The Watchers. You're listening to The Watchers. Are you?
That sounded like a question.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
Oh, God.
You're listening to The Watchers, a show where two women from opposite ends of New Jersey watch movies and TV about Martha Washington.
Oh, my God.
Hip lady.
She really supported her husband, you know?
Behind every good man, there is a woman. And that woman was Martha Washington, man. And every day George would come home, she would have a big fat bowl waiting for him, man.
She would have a big fat bowl waiting, yep.
When he came in the door, man, she was a hip lady, man.
That's right.
You know
That's
what?
right.
You know who else was a hip lady?
Who?
Velma from Scooby-Doo, which is a line from Can't Hardly Wait, which is a movie that's only a few years younger than this one.
Yeah.
And it's when Jason Segel and the other guy, there's like the two stoners in the movie. One of them is Jason Segel, one of them is another guy. And he says like, you know who I always loved? I forget what the like setup is, but he says Velma from Scooby-Doo. She was a hip lady. And I just wonder if that is like a weird stoner throwback to Dazed and Confused.
Oh, yeah, I'm Jodie, and you're Andrea.
Yeah, we watched...
we watched Dazed and Confused.
That's right.
Yeah.
1993.
Year I graduated high school.
Do you want to know how old I was?
No.
Okay.
I'm guessing about 10 years younger than me. Just a guess.
I was 7.
Yeah. But before we get to our film this week, we have to talk about something extremely exciting. Oh, God. It's happening. Finally, we know. Season 4.
Season 4.
Yeah.
It's coming back.
Thank God.
Maybe before I turn 50. Who knows?
Hopefully. Definitely not before I turn 50. But thank God. Yeah, we finally got the announcement. They are renewed for season 4. Thank you to the folks that... Actually, I found out from my Instagram messages, a couple of people that... friends and listeners and other folks all let me know before I even saw the news that it was back, which was such good news.
I was trying to be patient because I know that not every show is Severance who gets renewed and we find out 2 seconds after the season finale.
Right.
I've lived through shows, I understand.
Right.
But I was starting to get a little nervous.
Me too. I mean, you know, there's been lots of conversation about the ratings and all of that for this last season. You know, most of the numbers were good.
Yeah.
But also...
But it doesn't always matter.
Yeah. So thankfully they're going to get... It sounds like probably the last season. I can't imagine... If it took them this long to greenlight season 4, that unless the new season is like a runaway crazy hit, it's probably the last season. But I think that's okay. I hate to say that. Like, structurally, it makes sense. Yeah, I don't want that. What I don't want is for them to drag it out.
No.
And have the quality dip, you know?
Right.
Like, I don't want them to do a 5th season if they don't have, like, a good reason to. And I do think at this point, one more season could really, like, they could go out with a bang. They could tie it up really well.
One really strong season where we are back home in the 90s.
Hell yeah.
And tying up whatever the fuck is supposed to happen in our current day.
Yeah.
Like, would be, I think,
perfect.
So good.
Yeah. I think my ideal 4th season is, like, you know, if it's going to be 10 episodes, we get, like, 1 to 2 where they show the rescue, get them out of the woods, and the rest is at home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we get, you know, Shauna trying to, like, dissect frogs in biology class and be excellent at it. We get the fallout. Maybe we get to see, like, you know, a little bit of an in-between, you know? Like, maybe we see Ty go to law school. I don't know. There's just, like, so much to mine there that I'm really excited to see what they focus on.
But we'll see.
So exciting.
All right.
Cool. Let's get into the real reason we're here.
Do you know when this movie takes place?
Oh, 1976.
Yeah. Do you know what day and month?
I wrote it down. It takes place on May 26th, maybe? 1976? Is that it? That's my guess. I wrote it down.
The 26th or the 28th. It's May 28th.
1976.
Do you know what today is?
The 23rd.
Well,
I'm kidding.
I'm asking you really difficult questions. And
You are.
I didn't think we're going to be that difficult.
I haven't finished my coffee yet.
Do you know what today is?
May 28th.
The 26th.
But the last day of school is May 28th, 1976.
Yeah, we're covering this movie, though, 2 days before it actually takes place. We're like prime. We didn't do it on purpose.
I thought it was going to be even cooler that we were coming out with this episode on the day.
No, just this would be a lot cooler if it were the day. But it's
there's other cool coincidences. Like, I graduated high school the year this came out. And
I kind of think this coming out 2 days before the actual date the movie takes place on is a cooler coincidence, but okay.
Also, no, even cooler, maybe. My brother graduated high school in 1976.
Jodie, none of this is cooler than the fact that we randomly are releasing this episode 2 days before the actual day the movie takes place.
Okay.
Accidentally.
Sure.
This movie, I don't know. I'm not obviously from Texas. I've spent a lot of time in Austin, but in the 2010s, so very different. I listened to an interview with Richard Linklater and Melissa Maris, who wrote the book All Right, All Right, All Right. It's the oral history of Dazed and Confused. I read a lot of the book too. It's great even if you kind of aren't super like into this movie, but you are interested in oral histories, which I love.
Yeah.
And how movies get made and that kind of thing.
Totally.
I think it's totally worth a read. But they were both saying the thing that they're really tickled by is how many people are like, this movie felt just like my high school experience. Like, it was exactly like that. Well, I wasn't in school in Texas and I didn't drive those kinds of cars and we didn't do that stuff, but like otherwise it was my high school experience. And I totally understand that.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I read was that his original version of this, which I'm sure you know, was going to be much more avant-garde and esoteric. It was going to just be like two guys listening to the entire ZZ Top album, driving around in a car together.
And a lot darker, I read too. And then it kind of became a party movie that he hadn't really anticipated. There's still some of that. I think you said you had a similar feeling going into this movie as me, as this was a movie you watched a bunch as a younger person and it just didn't carry over with you.
Yeah. So it just didn't connect with me emotionally.
Yeah.
It's more of a vibe.
Totally more of a vibe. Absolutely like a put it on in the background movie while you're hanging out.
Yeah.
I was like really struggling with, I know I texted you, I watched it in 2 segments, and I think I texted you when I stopped the first time through. I was like having a really hard time locking in at first.
Yeah.
And I was trying to figure out what it was, because it's not the lack of plot, which is what some people complain about. It's not, it took until I listened to this interview to really, and I'll link to it in the episode notes, but when I watched it as a young person, it was like aspirational for me.
Absolutely.
I was like, I can't wait for high school to be like this. And it kind of was for me, the driving around aimlessly.
Oh, like, that's the thing that's the easiest to connect to. Totally.
But it feels so mean now as an adult. Like watching, especially obviously, so how do we want to approach this? There's no point in recapping the plot. There is a bunch of incoming freshmen and incoming seniors for the most part, other than Matthew McConaughey, who's in his early 20s in the movie. I mean, everybody in this movie for the most part is in their early adult. 20s.
Yeah. But in the film.
Yeah. But kind of just like hanging around and interacting and crossing paths.
And the thing that people remember the most is that it involves a pretty violent hazing ritual of the incoming freshmen by this incoming seniors, of paddling the shit out of the boys and humiliating the girls.
It's not even just the ritual of it, because I hate, obviously, hazing, and I understand that in the 90s and also I guess in the 70s, like, we felt a little differently about it. I know we've really cracked down on hazing in general.
Yeah.
Or have tried to. But
as an old person who graduated the year this came out, it was not cool then either. We weren't okay with it.
To watch. And it's not even just the like hazing and ritual of it. It's all the meanness around it of like when in the beginning when Parker Posey is like sort of pretending to be nice, or it seems like she's being nice. She's like, you know, like, oh, you guys are almost done, blah, blah, blah. She's like, one of them says like, oh, I have to pretend to be a bitch, whatever. But then when they run into these girls, like, it's so...
Yeah. And like the thing that I was reminded of watching it this time was like, how clearly gender delineated it is. Like, the boys get violence, the girls get sexual humiliation.
Right.
And that is just what is expected. And, you know, it's pretty gross. It's pretty degrading. It's pretty terrible in both cases, you know? And, like, I'm sure there's still people out there that are like, oh, it's just, you know, a rite of passage or whatever. Yeah. But, like, no, it's actually very violent and very disgusting what they do with the girls. And so that's the thing that reads tough for me still.
Yeah. The, like, pacifiers, like, it's all just so... And so the thing that I like in all of the research I did is Richard Linklater being like, this was supposed to be an anti-nostalgia movie. My characters say the 70s suck. My characters say if we look back on these as our best years, remind me to kill myself. Like, it's he really tried. And I have Kevin Smith, here's our Jersey connection. He's a big Linklater fan. He's a big
obviously.
Yeah, Dazed and Confused fan. And he contributes to the oral history in this book. And he says, I'm just going to read a little bit from this book, if you don't mind. Linklater says, I swear I tried to make the movie immune to nostalgia. I even had the characters say the 70s suck. I thought it would be impossible to look back fondly on the 70s. I would never want to go back to that. And then Smith says, that was the thing Richard fucked up royally. We can't pick what the movie is. The movie's going to be what the audience says it is.
Related to that, like, one of the interviews I read with him, he says... He talks about how he's trying to make an anti-nostalgia movie, and he says, but it's like trying to make an anti-war movie. Just by depicting it, you make it look fun. I wanted to do a realistic teen movie. Most of them had too much drama and plot, but teenage life is more like you're looking for the party, looking for something cool, the endless pursuit of something you never find. And even if you do, you never quite appreciate it. That, to me, is why this movie resonates, regardless of all the other stuff.
And understanding that that's what he was doing.
Yeah.
And did that successfully, and it's not that he was trying to glamorize it, that's just how other people have watched it, made it so much, it went down so much smoother when I checked back into the second half of it.
Yeah, and he says, like, thinking about, like, the generational part of it, I mean, like, they mention this in the movie, that's the kids, I can't remember who says it, but it's like, they talk about how every other generation...
Yeah,
is cool. And they're like, maybe the 80s will be great. No, I wasn't doing the math because I don't want to think about it. But Linklater said, I remember in the 70s, I couldn't wait for the 80s, but every generation sucks in a different way when you're a kid. Dazed takes place literally weeks before punk happens.
Yeah.
Which is, like, really fun to think about. He says, I was going to put a Ramones song over the closing credits. Like, oh, that's the future. So.
That's so cool.
Yeah. But the hazing was real. It came, like, he talks about how little he made up in this movie, like, from his actual teen years in Huntsville. So much so. Did you read about the people, Watterson and a couple of other people trying to sue him? He didn't change any of the names.
The statute of limitations is up, so they
names. Couldn't. Yeah. He says he was talking about Huntsville, and he says it's a small town, 18,000 people in East Texas, and they have this really sadistic initiation ritual for the freshmen. I'm not that creative. It's the stuff that really happened.
He really won me over reading. I've kind of avoided learning anything about him until this movie because something about the movies he makes has always made me feel like, and I have such little patience for people who are really precious about their work. And I've always gotten that sense just from what he makes. But hearing him talk about stuff, like, I was really charmed by him. He seems super self-aware.
Have you seen Boyhood?
No, but exactly.
I haven't either.
Like, and he's doing Merrily We Roll Along. Do you know anything about that musical? So it takes place over 20 years, and it is in reverse. So you meet the people. The first act is them now kind of like sad and miserable, and then you go back a few years, and you go back a few years. And so he's filming it in reverse over like 17 years.
Yeah, and I think, like... not to be super gendered about it, but, like, I feel like the reason that I never, looked out for his other films is because this is such a male film.
Totally.
Like, we talked about how in last week's conversation about Reality Bites, how it's like a story created by a woman and then I almost said wrecked, re-envisioned by a man. And, like, men can tell men's stories, and I have no problem with it. And honestly, most of my life, I've had to find parts of myself in those stories. And I did with this movie as well. I loved it when I was younger. It was, even though I was 17 when this came out, or 17 when this came out, it was aspirational for me too, because I had never done any drugs. I was a complete, like, clean kid. Like, you know, my parents were addicts. And so I was, and I don't care. I can say that. They're both, my dad's dead and my mom is extremely open. And like, I never did anything. And so it was sort of aspirational, this like, sort of drug culture. But then also it was really reflective of what my last couple of years of high school were like. And so I related to parts of it, but the women in it are so flimsy, as they are in a lot of these movies.
Right.
Like,
and it's funny too, because for the most part, other than maybe like Cynthia, it's like the guys are so, and this is something that I am often charmed by. We know what a Dawson's Creek fan I am. So hyperverbal. I was like, oh, this might be the first instance I can think of something that I watched. Because I saw this right when I remember renting it from Blockbuster as soon as it was able to be. And I was young. I would have been like probably 8 by the time this hit shelves. So probably the first instance of that kind of, this is how teens talk, I guess.
Yeah.
Like growing up thinking that. I can't wait to be able to talk like a teenager. That's all the guys, though. Especially like Adam Goldberg is... exhausting.
But
He's the girls don't get that.
No, the girls are there to be like, there are quote unquote cool girls in this movie that are
cooler
like,
than you would have gotten from a lot of other movies of the time.
Totally. But they have very little to do. They're like accessories, really. And like,
Mila Jovovich is a perfect example of that.
Well, and I'm sure you probably read like she was not happy. She had a much bigger role originally, and it kind of got cut down because it wasn't, I guess, working.
She's like less than, which I didn't realize. This says a lot about how much she kind of pops in this movie for me, though. She's got less than 2 minutes of screen time.
That's crazy.
As opposed to, which I'm sure you also read about, what's his face in the beginning of the movie, whose house is supposed to be the party house.
Keith?
Is that
Kevin? It's either Kevin or Keith. It's Keith in one of the references, I think, in the original script. I can't remember.
Doesn't matter because he gets almost completely cut out of the movie. He was supposed to be one of the main, like one of the leads, but he and Jason London didn't get along.
Hated each other. Yeah, Kevin.
So much so that Kevin... Okay, great. Thank you. So much so that Kevin got cut from a lot of the film, and that's why like any scenes with them together, they don't have any dialogue. Like they hated each other. But it has never occurred to me that like, because I was watching it and I was like, oh yeah, this movie should be like the fact that there aren't any scenes of like kids trying to like bust down the door for the party that isn't happening, and the dad there trying to kick them all out and him trying to like,
there were a few of them like knocking on the door,
but it's not the like focus of the movie at all, and that's why. But it never clicked for me.
Well, and so that's
so forgettable.
Absolutely. That's Sean Andrews, who was briefly married to Mila Jovovich.
Oh, interesting.
Who was 16 at the time.
How old is he?
I don't know, but I'm guessing not 16. The marriage was annulled by Jovovich's mother 2 months later.
Well, there you go. That explains it. Or that tells you. I said most of these people are in their early 20s. Wiley Wiggins, Wiley Wiggins and Rory Cochrane, I was in love with the two of them as a child.
I can see why. They were a little young for me when this movie came out, but I thought that they were adorable in like a little brother kind of way.
Well, I think, and Wiley Wiggins, I think, was actually 16 or 17 when they made this movie. Rory was a little older, but...
And he apparently was... He had done a little work before this, but he was approached by a member of the casting department outside of a coffee shop to get him to audition.
Funny. This movie, it's not that I forget, but I feel like two things. The 70s of this movie feels so incidental.
Yeah.
And also half the kids I knew dressed like half the kids in this movie anyway.
I wanted to pull photos of me from this time period because I was dressed exactly like this. Like, we were all wearing flared pants. We were all wearing 70s clothes. We were all going to Dead shows in the 90s. Like, it was the resurgence of this time period. That's why it hit so hard. Like, this was my culture.
Right. Well, and it's so funny because I read another article that I will find, that said like kids in the 70s though weren't dressed like they were coming out of a 70s fashion show. They'd all be in jeans and a t-shirt, and it's like, because this is the 90s view of
absolutely
the 70s, this is what it looks like.
I have pictures of my brothers from this time that are hilarious. But yeah, I think we should talk about the cast a little bit more since we're talking about it now. Like, because this cast is stacked. And apparently, like, everyone and their brother was trying to get into this film at the time.
Yeah. And it's funny, though, it's stacked in hindsight. None of these people really.
Right.
Who was the most
famous person?
Yeah. At the time.
I would say probably, well, most accomplished maybe was, let's see. I mean, Parker Posey, maybe?
Maybe?
But yeah, there was a bunch of unknowns. I mean, like, but I was reading that the people that were trying to get cast in this were like Claire Danes, Elizabeth Berkley, Ashley Judd, Brendan Fraser, Jon Favreau, and Vince Vaughn were all considered for roles.
Crazy.
But like, the fact that Joey Lauren Adams is in this movie with the twin brother,
I know,
of the person who was in
the better
in
actor
Mallrats,
of the two, also Jason over Jeremy. But yeah.
But so just for people who aren't insane Kevin Smith heads, like Jason London and Jeremy London, twin brothers, both actors. Jason London in this as Pink, Jeremy London in Mallrats as TS, the quote-unquote main character, even though the least memorable of all of them. So there's this like Kevin Smith veil over this movie for me because of what comes after.
Well, he even says in the All Right book that like he was, or somebody says, maybe it's Linklater, but somebody is like, oh, it's like Kevin Smith saw Dazed and Confused and was like, oh, I love these people. They're going to be in my movie.
Yeah, but like I'll take the other brother, the one that can't act as well for some reason.
Yeah.
So other folks, so obviously Jason London, Joey Lauren Adams, Mila Jovovich, Sean Andrews, Rory Cochrane. We talked about Adam Goldberg, Anthony Rapp, who plays Tony. He originated the role of Mark in Rent.
Yeah.
On Broadway. I didn't realize this. I had so many friends that were Rent heads, but I was not of the financial position to be going to Broadway shows at the time, even though I moved to the city kind of during the heyday. And then we mentioned Cynthia Marissa Ribisi,
Giovanni's
twin sister of Giovanni Ribisi, was also married to Beck for a long time.
Yeah, I saw a picture of the two of them together while I was doing my research, and I was like, oh, huh. What a couple. What a 90s couple.
Yeah. I appreciated her in this movie at the time. I felt like when you're trying to place yourself as a teenager into movies like this, like, I know damn well I'm not the Mila Jovovich or the Joey Lauren Adams or the Michelle Burke. Like, I'm not one of that group. But I could see myself very easily as the Cynthia riding around with two overly verbose, nerdy boys. Like,
they reminded me of Ethan Hawke in Reality Bites, the guys, of being like, they think they're so smart and it makes them so much better than everyone else.
Yes.
But but totally, I get that.
A few other folks. So obviously Parker Posey as Darla, who is vicious in this movie.
So nasty.
But also there's a moment, since we just watched Party Girl, there was a moment at the Woods party where she's dancing, where I was like, there's Parker Posey. There's the Parker Posey we love, dancing around like an idiot in the woods. Obviously Matthew McConaughey, famous story about how he was cast.
Just being, it was like charming at a party, hit it off.
Yeah.
Then went up to the guy's hotel room and then called. Somebody got like kicked out of the bar. Did you hear this part of the story?
No, I just heard that he met him at a bar and was like charmed.
Yeah, he was like trying more to be a director, and the story goes that like he was charmed by him. They went back to whoever's hotel room. I don't know if it was Linklater, but somebody had gotten kicked out, and McConaughey called down to like read them, like to like give them the business about it. But he was so charming in doing it that they were like, there's the Texas charm we need in this movie.
Yeah. And it's funny, like, other than his creepiness around the women, I kind of love his character still.
He's maybe my favorite part of this movie. That's the other thing too. It's like, he's creepy. I mean,
he has the famous line about like, I get older, they stay the same age, which is disgusting. But
it's funny because like everybody is creepy about the women in this movie. The way the guys give Mitch like advice on how to deal with what's her face. Just like everything about it is
it's
gross.
all creepy.
Yeah. So now in hindsight, comparison wise, and also in my head, I'm like, this is maybe going to sound wrong. In my head, he's also a child. 18 and 22. So I'm like, you're all idiots.
Yeah, they're all idiots, for sure.
Not that it's okay that he's trying to date high school girls. Like, that's gross. But
we all knew those people.
Yeah.
Certainly.
But I do think other than being a real creep, he's the most charming person in this movie.
Oh, 100%. Because it's like... Well, also, like, you end up contrasting him with Ben Affleck's character, who Ben Affleck in this period was only playing assholes, but a severely, like, horrible person here. And so, you know, on the spectrum of creepy and aggressive dudes, I prefer, like, creepy and chill versus creepy and violent. Like, it's just a scale.
That's exactly right. It is, because
it's a spectrum.
It is totally the violence of this movie that I have the biggest reaction to.
Yeah.
And so.
No, I mean, like, I saw it referred to as homoerotic multiple times, and I was like, yes, but also incredibly violent and disgusting.
Yeah, there's so much of the dudes beating each other, but then also on the field, they're all like rolling around together. At the end of the movie, they're
clearly in love with each other in some way.
It's one of those.
This is another movie, 2 in a row, where we have
Poor
Renee Zellweger.
Poor Renee.
Quote, girl in blue truck holding funnel.
2 in a row uncredited. But then she really, because like Empire Records is not too long after
she
this.
pops right after.
And then I didn't realize Cherry Maguire is only like a year after Empire Records. And they feel
which is nuts.
So far apart to me.
Yeah, very different worlds. One cast member I need to mention is Kim Krazan, Miss Ginny. Oh. She has, to me, the best line in the movie, but also she is best known for originating the story and characters in the Before trilogy. So Before Sunrise, Before Sunset. Yeah.
Fascinating.
She was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay and a Writers Guild Award for it. The trilogy is based on characters she created with Richard Linklater. So,
I had no idea. That's
love
really
her
cool.
so much. I have to. We did this off mic, but I'm going to do it again. We have to read her line because it is, to me, the funniest line in the movie now as an adult who teaches. As her students are leaving the classroom at the end of the year, she says, "This summer, when you're being inundated with all that American bicentennial 4th of July brouhaha, don't forget what you're celebrating. And that's the fact that a bunch of slave-owning, aristocratic white males didn't want to pay their taxes. And she is who I aspire to be as a teacher."
Yeah, that rules.
The other fun thing about her, she's the most fascinating person to me that I didn't know about from this movie, because she also is interested in and publishes on Anais Nin, who I was obsessed with in college, as most, I think, queer women in their 1920s years were. She published an article in the Huffington Post in 2013 revealing she had found a previously unpublished love letter written by Gore Vidal to Anais Nin.
Whoa.
And then she did this research in the run-up to the release of the latest volume of Nin's uncensored diary, for which she wrote the foreword. In 2019, she published Spy in the House of Anais Nin, an examination of long-buried letters, papers, and original manuscripts she found while doing archival work in Nin's Los Angeles home.
I am so
obsessed with this person.
Yeah, she's very cool. Wow.
Like, I didn't know any of this, and now I want to go get that book, and read it. Because honestly, how no one knew that I was, like, this queer neurodivergent teenager is beyond me. Because I was literally, like, reading Anais Nin and Henry Miller and, like, obsessing over just the most obvious things at the time. But anyway... Like, even the girls in this movie, like, watching it, I was like, oh, I want to be friends with Joey Lauren Adams and Michelle Burke. They're so cool.
Yeah, and like, so friendly and welcoming. So definitely it's friendship for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wiley Wiggins. Mm-hmm. You know what he does now?
I do. Why don't you tell us?
He teaches, like, game design.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time reading his student evaluations. They love him.
Oh, my God. That's amazing.
And he's got this class that sounds so fun. It's, like, beginning like prototyping. The last class he taught, it looks like that's up online, is from spring 2024.
Oh my God. Where does he teach?
It's a university in Texas. I forget which one.
That is amazing. He also run some festival, or did.
Yeah. And
Fantastic Arcade.
Syllabus is cool as hell. It makes me want to take his class. So
I love that. I love that so much.
He's like worked a little bit here and there, but yeah. UT. He's at UT.
Wow.
So
nice.
Yeah. I love to learn that. Students really like him. Seems like his class is challenging, but not
I love that you couldn't find the
impossible.
student reviews online. Are you on Rate My Professor?
No, he weirdly isn't on Rate My Professors. I couldn't find him, maybe because he has a different, maybe he doesn't go by, although his website is Wiley Wiggins.
Yeah, a lot of people, I feel like Rate My Professor has fallen off. Like they talk on like Yik Yak and stuff now, which is just a scary place.
I didn't know Yik Yak was still a thing.
It is. I hear about it.
That's fascinating. Oh, he also has a very active blog, April 22nd, 2025. Animation Obsessive, revisiting Trinka's The Hand. Should we ask him to do the podcast?
Maybe.
I bet he would.
So the reception of this movie at the time was sort of surprising to me in retrospect, because as a 17-year-old when this came out, everyone I knew loved this movie and was obsessed with it and quoted it all the time. But it made like no money. Yeah. It was made for $7 million and it made $8.
It's
not good.
It's funny because I'm going to keep going back to this interview because it was so revealing. Linklater was like, I actually don't really think of it as a flop because it was great for an indie release. It's just that it wasn't an indie movie. It's a studio movie that didn't do well as a big studio film.
Exactly. Well, and it's now a cult classic. Like, it's on all sorts of lists. Like, third on Entertainment Weekly's magazine. It ranked third on Entertainment Weekly's list of the 50 best high school movies. It was like 10th on the funniest movies of the past 25 years list, which that I do not get. Because it's funny, but it's not like laugh out loud funny.
No, and it doesn't. I actually don't even think it's that. I'm trying to think of like moments that in this movie that make me laugh.
No, I know. There aren't that many.
And I don't even think, even when I was less critical of the more difficult moments in this movie, I don't remember thinking other than Rory Cochrane. He's the funniest part of the movie for sure. Yeah.
So we used to like weird quote like his obsession, like that obsession with getting shotgun in the car is so accurate.
I think he's great. And I mean, I don't know where this goes, so it's going to go here. Rory Cochrane and Renee Zellweger, both in Empire Records. Empire Records, there's a sticker on the cash register. It's a Dazed and Confused sticker.
Nice. So, yeah.
That's all. Just a little fun.
Yeah. Connection. I mean, I do think that the way that Linklater works and worked in this movie is interesting. And I do want to talk a little bit about the original idea for this movie a little bit more, because basically the way he filmed this was like he gave the actors a lot of control, right? He gave them mixtapes for each of their characters to listen to. He was really strict about like getting them into the 70s mindset, but also he let them kind of improv their characters, improv lines. Like a lot of why Matthew McConaughey has so much in this movie is because he was being Matthew McConaughey and they were just like loving it. But his original vision of this movie, like I said, was listening, like two guys in a car listening to an entire ZZ Top album, driving around for the entire movie. And I kind of feel like I would have loved that movie because there's something because we were saying that like the part of this movie that really resonated and felt true to life was the driving around endlessly with your friends in the car. And if that was the whole movie, it would have been something very different. It would have been this like weird experimental thing. But I think I kind of would have loved it because literally like that was life then.
I think that would have been a movie that I would have watched once and been like, oh, pretty cool. I don't know that it's a movie that would have been the background movie.
No, it wouldn't have been a background movie at all. It would have been something very different. But I think that it's interesting to take the sort of essence of what I connected to with this movie and make it a whole thing. Because like... So in this movie, they are driving around from the burger joint, top notch, to the pool hall, to the school. Where else did they go? To the woods, the woods party, right? But like, and I'm sure you have this as well. The last 2 years of high school were spent for me in a car going between 7-Eleven, the woods, or the railroad tracks for us. Our woods was basically like, you know where the power lines go through, like some trees, like where they cut through the trees and there's power lines.
I understand this is so North
woods.
Jersey of you to be like, you understand how sometimes there are trees sometimes?
And then sometimes they cut them back so the power lines can go through.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where we hung out. That and the railroad tracks. Because in North Jersey, we have lots of railroads that go to the city where all of our, not my parents, but a lot of people's parents worked. Anyway, so most of my junior and senior year of high school were spent between someone's house party, the woods, 7-Eleven, and the pool hall.
Right.
Those were the 4 places. And so this was the most fucking, even though it took place in Texas and we didn't have any outdoor burger joints in New Jersey, we had the 7-Eleven parking lot. We had the railroad tracks.
You don't have any, like, Roller Girl? You don't have, like, any Weber's or Stewart's up there?
No. Oh. We had Friendlies. We would go to Friendlies.
Yeah. Stewart's and Weber's were 2, like, outdoor burger joints where they would, like, come up on skates. And
we didn't have any of that. But, like, that is the part where it's like you're riding around in the car with your friends. Your car is a piece of shit. Their cars are nicer than our cars were in this movie by far. Even though they're all like vintage.
So
yeah, I know.
I would be surprised if. Well, that's what. Okay, finish your, and then I'm gonna have.
Okay. I just was thinking about like the experience of driving around, smoking cigarettes, listening to music, driving up on your friends, showing up at a place, knowing that people in your social circle were going to be there. And if they weren't there, they were at the other place that you could go to.
Yeah.
Shout out to Pool Time in Midland Park, by the way. I don't think it exists anymore. But I smoked many cigarettes and listened to lots of 70s rock in that pool hall.
Perfect. It's funny because I think my generation is probably the last one that can really connect with a lot of this movie because it's just so not. I don't know where
because people didn't have that freedom afterwards.
Well, and exactly, and like that freedom, and also that unknowingness, like. The cell phones made it so not only were your parents connected to you at all times, but you were connected to everyone else. So that like aimless driving around just wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Somebody said something I read. Oh, this is from All Right. Linklater believed Dazed and Confused contradicted the notion of nostalgia. He thought he was documenting small changes in the culture and that his depiction of the 70s as boring and oppressive would stop people from lionizing the past. What he failed to realize was that the reality he'd reconstructed was not that different from what was still happening in most of America. When teenagers saw Dazed and Confused in 1993, they were still driving around, listening to rock music, making out, getting busted for weed.
That's right.
Today, it feels like the teenage culture represented in the movie didn't just change, it totally disappeared. The number of teenagers who have a driver's license has sharply declined. No one under the age of 18 really listens to rock music anymore. Weed is legal in many states, but opioids are killing young people. So it's a totally different...
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, getting busted for weed was terrifying at that time. Like,
well, we haven't even mentioned the anti-drug pledge.
Oh my God,
he's taking so seriously.
Yeah.
That feels a little silly now, but in the 90s even it wasn't.
100%. It's like the biggest thing, the biggest fear of my growing up, and I absolutely understand the privilege in saying this. The biggest fear in my teen years was getting busted in the woods for drinking. Mm-hmm. Also, I wasn't drinking, but it was by association.
Yeah.
And getting busted at a house party or getting busted for weed. Mm-hmm. Like, I had a brief period of being a pothead. And I think I mentioned last week, I don't know if this was on mic or not, but I started smoking weed in college because I had a crush on my roommate and she was a pothead. And I was like, oh, me too now. And I smoked for like a year or two and then ended up doing acid and it went very badly and it ruined, ruined a lot of things for me. Including enjoying weed. But, you know, I remember driving home from the city one night in like 95 in my car that was covered in Grateful Dead stickers.
Mm-hmm. That's the other thing that makes it hard to remember this movie isn't set in the 90s, because all the guys I knew when I was a young person thought they were so cool for listening to this music. So,
I went to a Dead show in 95. It was one of his last shows. But driving home from the city one night in my Chevy Corsica filled with soda cans and covered in stickers, all related to peace and the 70s, and getting pulled over by bored suburban cops who literally at 3 a.m. searched my entire car, took everything out of the car.
They had nothing better to do.
They had nothing to do. I had stopped smoking weed, thankfully, about 6 months prior. And I'm a photographer, and I had film canisters in the car. And when they found those film canisters, they thought they had gotten something. They were like, oh, what's in here? And I was like...
Yeah,
film.
I mean, a lot of us were keeping our weed in those canisters.
Of course, but I was keeping film in them at that point.
I think maybe Linklater's a little too old. He's 64 now. So I don't think he had quite the handle on what kids in the 90s were doing to realize that this movie
and how close it was.
Didn't feel that different.
I just put 2 pictures in the chat of the pool hall that I went to as a teenager all the time, just because it's like such a vibe.
Yeah.
The wood paneling and all of that.
Beautiful.
And the jukebox in the back that we would play all the like Grateful Dead songs on.
There's have you read any Chuck Klosterman?
Not really. I know I should.
I really liked him for a while. I think he's a little tiresome, but for folks who don't know Klosterman, he's a pop culture critic and a music writer. He wrote for Spin for years, but and a ton of other stuff. He's got a ton of books out. Most of them are essay collections on various topics. He wrote the write up for the Criterion collection, for Dazed and Confused for Criterion.
Yeah.
And he said, I did not see this film in 1993, although I read a lot of reviews, many of which were mixed and most of which made reference to American Graffiti, a film I hated because of Richard Dreyfuss, whom I hated on principle, which I totally understand. But I just wanted to include that dig at Dreyfuss. What I actually wanted to share was Dazed and Confused is not a movie about how things were. Dazed and Confused is a movie about how things are remembered. This film doesn't illustrate what it was actually like to be in semi-rural Texas in 1976. But I'm sure it evokes how that time and place must retrospectively feel to anyone who was actually there. Like so many of Linklater's movies, Dazed and Confused is about how memory operates and what memories mean. When I recall my most insane high school experiences, it's difficult to untangle what truly happened, what seems retrospectively plausible, and what I pretend to remember in my mind. And I feel like that's like...
Yeah.
And then he says, that's not something you can realize by watching it once. Mythology requires repetition. And I think that is like... a really good lens if you also watched and maybe had a difficult time clicking with this movie as an adult. That's like one way to think about it, I think.
And I think that's why, like, even though when I was watching it, all of the violence and all the like humiliation of the girls definitely wasn't fun for me to like revisit, I didn't hate my time with this movie, even though I haven't watched it in a long time, because I felt like specifically the scenes at the pool hall and in the woods, I was like, oh, yep, there I am again, you know? Like, and the woods scene in particular, I mean, we were watching these movies because of Yellow Jackets. That woods party, like, they clearly kind of modeled the party in the pilot episode after this. Like, the keg party in the woods where, you know, it's just like... It's such a Dazed and Confused reference now looking back at it.
That's funny. Yeah.
There's so many similarities.
You're so right. The like big fight. That too. I just can't. I don't want to keep giving Adam Goldberg a hard time, but when he gets
it's not technically Adam Goldberg, it's his character.
It feels like it's him. He gets so bent out of shape by that. Well, both of them. The two, him and then Clint, the other guy, who gets so bent out of shape about each other for no reason. It's such a like... I was just so tired, like, watching that.
I just, like... I don't know. High school was really tough in a lot of ways, but this, to me, represents and highlights the best parts of it. Like, having that group of friends... Like, I've said this before. I worked at a bagel shop in high school. And I specifically remember one day we were working and a big snowstorm came in the winter. And like, it was a Sunday, I think. And after we got out of work at like 1:00, it was snowing like crazy. My car was, I think at the time, an 86 Ford Tempo with like bald tires. And me and my friends that I worked with at the bagel shop drove to the pool hall in the snow, somehow made it alive, to go play pool for the afternoon with like all the people we knew. Right. And just smoke and listen to the jukebox. Like, it's just, those are the things that you remember. Like you said, it's about the memories. Like, those are the things you remember 20 years later as the best parts of being at like that age.
Yeah, it's so very that, this movie.
Yeah, it really, like, and those people too, like, I guess sometimes they do fade from your life. Like, a lot of them I don't really talk to that much anymore. But also, when I was like having a really hard time in my 30s and my life kind of fell apart, those are the people that showed up and literally like drove me to where I was going to be moving to and like packed up their cars. Like, there's something about that shared history and like being, not even being like emotionally close, but being physically in proximity to the same group of people for so many years and spending so many days of the week with them that is hard to like fully break.
Oh, you bring up an interesting point, and it's something I like about this movie though, is like, we don't know how long these people stay friends. We don't know if Pink signs that sheet, and if he doesn't, maybe he doesn't get to play football next year.
He refuses to at the end of the movie.
And then maybe he grows apart from those guys. Like, we have no idea. And I really like that it is such a small moment in the lives of these people. And that there's never been a Dazed and Confused too.
Yeah. Well, and that they don't try to pretend there's like this deep meaning to their friendships. Like, a lot of those high school friendships, like, you're friends because of proximity. And that creates the friendship. Right. And like, you're with the same people, like I said, every day for years. But it's not like you're necessarily having these like super deep conversations with that group of people. And they don't try to pretend that that's happening. Right. Like, the deepest conversation is like about whether it's worth signing a pledge and like letting down your friends by not playing football. Like, that's about as far as it goes. So I want to talk a little bit about, because we tend to do this, about the reviews of it at the time and the reception now.
I remember to find Ebert's.
Me too. Time. He gave it 3 stars.
Yeah, he kind of got it in a way a lot of people haven't.
Exactly. He says the film is art crossed with anthropology. It tells the painful underside of American graffiti. Linklater's style is to introduce some characters, linger with them for a while, and then move on to different characters, eventually circling back so that all stories get told simultaneously. And then he talks about the broness of it. He says, it is always the case in any group of males, students, fraternity brothers, military men, businessmen, that the ones most zealous about male bonding rituals, especially those involving drinking and quasi-sexual initiations, are the most troubled. Go off, Ebert.
Yep.
They secretly feel like outsiders. As their targets, they choose misfits who are too dumb or too smart, who are different in any way, who do not reflect the mediocrity of the crowd. That is a really insightful review of this movie from the time.
Yeah, especially knowing how sometimes he can really
sometimes he's not
miss.
On it. Yeah.
He says the film's real inspiration, I think, is to depict some high school kids from the 1970s with such unblinking attention that we will realize how romanticized most movie teenagers are. And I just think, like, Linklater says over and over again, he was trying to make an anti-John Hughes movie.
Yep.
And it's like, when you think about it that way, that's exactly that's exactly what this is.
Yep. I went on Reddit to look for some recent comments about this film, and it doesn't translate very well to today.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
What do people have to say?
So one person wrote, like, one of the first things that popped up when I searched this movie was somebody trying to understand what the hype was about. And he said, this was so funny, because it's like, it reveals itself as you go. He says, This movie felt so empty and boring and superficial dialogues. I mean, sure, they're teenagers, but what's the point of showing an hour and a half of kids driving around drinking and smoking? Wait for it. Is it something about the time and settings of the movie I missed? I'm not American. Is it just obsolete? Was it a mere reflection of the life of teenagers back then and considered cool? I hated it in the first 10 minutes. I wasn't expecting The Breakfast Club or anything, but I knew it was a critically acclaimed film, so I kept waiting for something to happen, and it never did. And so the defender of it says, you're entitled to an opinion, but this movie isn't supposed to have a main character or the generic plot conflict resolution crap. It's meant to be a snapshot of the life of teenagers in sleepy Austin, Texas in the 70s before the city was a big city. And then the couple, I'm just going to read two more little things.
Yeah.
The next person said, almost all of Linklater's films are meditations on dialogue. If you watch the Before trilogy, Waking Life, or Slacker, you'll have a better sense of what I mean. But if that sort of thing doesn't appeal to you, you might not like these films. And then finally, the last person said, it's kind of Linklater's style of filmmaking. He's literally the Gen X slacker director. The individual stories don't necessarily add up to a greater whole. It's more like slices of life over a given period of time. If you look at his other movies, the passing the time thing comes up a lot. Boyhood, Before Sunrise, etc. It's like if you want a John Hughes plot movie with lots of sort of like, traditional arc, this is not going to do it. But I just like the reveal of like, I don't get it. What the hell is this?
And
I'm
then
not
one lay
American.
at a time being
I didn't grow up here.
Yeah, everything about this explains why.
Yeah.
It's not for you, and that's okay.
I was looking for The Breakfast Club. I'm not from here. I've not had this experience. I don't understand. Yes.
I was looking for The Breakfast Club is perfect because it's like anti. Yeah. I just, something about you reading that made me think of my least favorite line / most revealing part. I know I'm really being hard on Mike, but I just am so tired of these kinds of people. But when he gets his ass kicked, but he doesn't want to admit that he got his ass kicked.
Yeah.
And he says, you're right. You read about like Jackson Pollock or Ernest Hemingway. You never read about who won or lost. Just they got into a brawl. And it's like, oh, if those are your guys.
Yeah. He's yeah, exactly. Hemingway and Pollock.
Yeah.
Oh, I just want this. Nobody cares about this but me, but I just want to highlight the fucking egg chair in Kevin's house. I wanted one of those so badly. Those are so cool. I still want one of those. I would still put that in my house. I think they're amazing. And there's like some little details in there that are very like on the nose, like the girls zipping up their jeans with pliers. The guy with the beer in his trunk, like his trunk full of beer. Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's... I loved Kevin's dad as a standout performance in this movie.
Totally. Yeah, his parents are much smarter than you think they are originally. Like, you think they're just going to be like the dumb parents that leave and like let the party happen, and then they're like, oh, no.
Nope.
Did you ever have a party at your house?
No, but I also lived, for the most part, two things. For the most part, I lived with my grandparents and my mom, and various other people. So there were always adults home, and nobody went on vacation. So there was never anybody. There was never a time for that. And then the other thing is, once I got to high school, my best friend had parents who took us all in as their children, and we just lived there. And if we wanted to have a party, they would just go. And we weren't drinkers. I didn't.
Yeah.
Like, I had a brief, I cut this from the episode last week because it sounded sad the way I introduced it, but I smoked a lot of pot when I was too young, and then I stopped, and I didn't drink or smoke anything, like do anything again until I was in my like mid-20s.
Yeah.
And so if we wanted to have a party, it was a sober party, and his parents would just go to bed. So we never had to do that. I was very lucky that way.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, so I mostly had friends that lived in the next town over who lived in giant houses, and like I was not economically on par with them, but like I got the benefits of being friends with people whose parents went on business trips. And so like they would throw parties when their parents were out of town, and it was very like classic teen movie, just like overrun with teenagers getting drunk and all of that. I had one party at my house one time, because I didn't typically have that opportunity, and we lived in like a smaller house, but my parents never went away. I don't know where they went. I think it was like for 2 nights. They went to like visit a family member or something and left me alone, and I threw a party. And my only memory of that party was like, I put away all the stuff that my mom would be really sad if broke. And I remember eating pizza in the bathtub with some friends because I was trying to get away from everybody.
I was going to say, it doesn't feel like being the like person in charge of that would be something you'd be really excited about. Yeah.
No, it's much better to be at someone else's house. Like, I remember this brother and sister that had parents who were never home, that always threw parties that the cops would come to. And like, we would just say, we'd spend the whole night there. Like, you know, it was a great time. It's just not as fun when it's at your house. This, do we need to touch on the soundtrack briefly?
I was just going to say, yeah.
Because it's incredible. I mean, it's definitely like, it's a throwback kind of incredible, but the soundtrack was a big hit at the time. It's got like all of the like classic rock.
This movie is the reason / is this movie the reason that every boy in the early 90s was still listening to this kind of music?
Maybe.
I don't know which came first.
Yeah, because literally
so
like, because this is 93. My first 2 to 3 years of college were right after this, and I only listened to classic rock
That's so
and
funny.
the Grateful Dead. That was like my, I mean, that's not entirely true. I did listen to some current music, but it was the current music that was referencing the older music.
Right. It is odd for me that I didn't connect with most of this music as a young person in the way that so many of my friends did.
Yeah. I was into all of it. Like this stuff, the Pink Floyd, all of that. I mean, it depended on when you were talking about. So like once I started doing drugs, I was like, Pink Floyd's great.
Like,
Before that, I was like, I don't understand. This is taking forever. But yeah, it kind of depends on like whether I was in my weed phase or not in my weed phase. But so just a quick recap of the soundtrack. So starts out with Sweet Emotion by Aerosmith. Deep Purple, Alice Cooper, War. It's like all over the place. Ted Nugent, Alice Cooper, said.
This is another good example of what they're talking about, of it being like sort of a nostalgia movie without meaning to be, and a memory movie without meaning to be, because that feels like such a cross section, because like Aerosmith is such a big deal in this movie, but they feel really out of place to me.
Absolutely, yes.
Or not out of place.
And Black Sabbath too doesn't fit the vibe entirely, but it was very huge. It was very huge. It was huge at the time.
Yeah.
Foghat, Peter Frampton, Kiss, ZZ Top, Steve Miller, and then we've got like the Runaways. Yeah, and it's just like it is kind of all over the place. So there was a article from, I think 2013, that was like a oral history of the movie in fucking Maxim. But one of the things I read that just kind of made me giggle was Rory Cochrane basically saying that like everyone that comes up to him just wants to smoke weed with him. And he's like, it's too strong for me these days. Aww. Which I understand. It's the weed of the 90s was quite different. I would also feel like a bit scared of like today's product.
Apparently 10%, depends on the source, but somewhere between a sixth and 10% of that 6.9 million budget went to securing
to
rights
the film.
to the music.
Sorry. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Apparently Dylan's Hurricane cost $80,000 to license.
Oh my God.
So, yeah. And apparently Zeppelin is not, even though the movie is called Dazed and Confused, which is a Zeppelin reference, I think they just said no.
Yeah. Also, the cast does reunions, or they did. Like, they did a 10-year reunion, a 20-year reunion, and during the pandemic, they did a table read. Like, they do still get together, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah, it is nice. It seems like people really do have fond memories of working on the movie together for the most part.
For the most part, yeah. Other than the, like, little bit of fighting we talked about already. Linklater seems like he tried to crack down on, like, not letting it actually be a drug and alcohol infused party on the set or amongst the characters, but like they all stayed at a hotel together. I don't think he was that successful at keeping it clean and sober.
Yeah.
Apparently when they filmed the last scene of the film, which was filmed last or close to last of them driving off to get the tickets for Aerosmith, Rory Cochrane lit up a real joint in the car because he was like, whatever, it's the last one.
That's
last scene.
Funny.
Yeah. Perfect. I mean, I feel like the reason we did this movie is because it was referenced so many times in the original pitch for Yellow Jackets. And to me, the only real connection that I see is like in the pilot, you know, which makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
you know, but is the pilot the vibe of like driving around with your friends, going to parties in the woods, like the specifically like Natalie and her friends, that feeling of like, that's, they feel like they could be in this movie.
Yeah. Well, and the pitch, I think I mentioned this, I think we talked about this a little bit last week, but the Dazed and Confused reference in the pitch makes a lot more sense when you remember that the series originally was going to be set in the 70s and 90s.
Yep.
And I didn't even really think about the extra level of Dazed and Confused was made in the 90s looking back the 70s. And so it's
that
not just the 70s,
really,
it's also the 90s of it.
Totally. Yeah, instead it went from that to 90s to, you know, 2020, but
right.
Or 2021. But like it makes a lot of sense when you think about it that way.
You can it's like really kind of get a feel of what the aesthetic of Yellow Jackets might have felt more like if that knowing this would have been a reference for it.
Yeah. I would love to see like a fan version of basically like the pilot episode, but in the 70s.
Yeah. Well, or even like, it's funny, all of the actors in playing the 90s teens feel like you could drop them in the 70s to me.
Especially like, Natalie and Van.
Natalie and Van, and even Shauna. Like, you can see them all in a way that then I don't know.
You could map Jackie onto like Michelle Burke's character.
It's fascinating to think about then having Melanie Linsky and Christina Ricci and all of those people playing 90s adults as opposed to 90s. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we know them as 90s kids. Like, there's just an extra layer there. It would have been really fascinating.
That would be really interesting. Yeah, I think that like the places it shows up the most is like Natalie and her friends, but also Van. Van reads very like 90s, but also a little bit 70s to me in their personality.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
So
nice.
I don't know that I would have connected as hard to the show if it were 70s, 90s versus 90s, 2020.
Yeah.
But I
true.
think it would have been really interesting still. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, should we talk about what we're going to do next week?
Yeah, I feel even more correct about the choice we're making after watching this.
I agree.
We're staying in high school.
Yes, we're staying in high school.
We've watched some kind of boy movies.
Yeah.
I think Reality Bites, we saw what happened when a boy gets a hold of a girl's script.
Yeah.
Dazed and Confused is so.
Yeah.
And so I think it's time we reward ourselves with a movie made by a woman, for women.
Yeah.
90s.
Yeah.
It
couldn't be more classic.
It's also Amy. So I'm doing the thing again where I
I
for
know.
some
Why
reason
do you do this huge buildup?
We're watching Clueless. I love Amy Heckerling. She's got John Hughes ties. This movie feels like the opposite of Dazed and Confused.
Yes.
In a lot of ways.
Yes.
And has obviously the 90s connection with Yellow Jackets and
I'm excited. This movie is a little bit after prime time for me, but I have always loved it. It's one of those that still got me. Like, there's a lot of stuff that is your movie that I kind of like appreciate from a distance. I love this movie. Like, this is not one of those. I
think, and it's hard, this is one that is going to be really hard for me to talk about objectively because I love it so much. It's one of those movies I know, no exaggeration, by heart. I just love it so much. But also, I think it's genuinely very good.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's Alicia Silverstone. I think I just now realized why I was open in my heart to this movie in a way that I wasn't to some of the others.
The Aerosmith video?
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
That's really funny. Okay.
Yeah. It's Alicia Silverstone and Liv Tyler's Aerosmith video that came out the year before. Mm-hmm. Yep. Having revelations every week as we do this podcast, where I understand my teen self better.
Yeah, it took me a long time to realize that I was in love with Alicia Silverstone as a young person, but
yeah,
she's
I was more in love with
so
Liv
good.
Tyler, but by association, totally connected.
What a movie!
What a movie! 1995. It is available right now only. Well, maybe other places too, but it's on Paramount Plus, which if you're a Yellow Jackets fan, you probably already pay for. It's also available on Amazon Prime. You can rent it a couple of different places. It's on YouTube with a Prime Time subscription. So it's a bunch of different places. It's free on Paramount Plus. The other ones are paid. But yeah.
This cast is just...
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have a lot to talk about next week.
Oh, it's going to be really fun. I'm
really
excited.
Absolute killer soundtrack. I think this movie maybe doesn't always get the credit it deserves for how great the soundtrack is.
Yeah, I don't think about it as having that amazing of a soundtrack, but it does. Mm-hmm. It really does.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not something that I associate with it. It's interesting.
Such a cool soundtrack.
Yeah. I think the reason that I don't associate the soundtrack as or the reason I don't think about the soundtrack as being so significant is because it's not themed and cohesive in the way that's say the Reality Bites soundtrack is or the Dazed and Confused. It's a little bit more scattered, but good scattered.
Yeah, it's another kind of cross section.
Yeah.
I just remembered too Jill Sabule, who her song Supermodel is one of the big ones in that. She's also I Kissed a Girl was one of her big breakout hits. She died this month.
She passed
died on
away.
May 1st. Yeah.
I know.
Sad.
Yeah.
Feels like I wanna
But yeah, there's a lot of sort of heavy hitters on this soundtrack for sure. Mm-hmm. So I'm psyched. I can't wait. We've talked about doing this one before and haven't. And so now we have a reason to because we're kind of going through the Yellow Jackets inspiration and reference lists.
Yeah.
So,
and it feels like a little reward from the last two. Not that I think we were both fond of the last two movies. It's just a different thing. A different experience. Yeah. So.
Absolutely. Amazing.
I'm excited to talk about Amy Heckerling. I think she's so cool.
I'll try not to talk about the Aerosmith video.
We can talk about the Aerosmith
any
video.
more than I already have. No, we've talked about the Aerosmith video. I want to just point out the fact that, and I don't know why I feel the need to do this, I was the same age as the girls in the video at the time.
I understand.
There's something about looking back at it now where you're a little cringe, but I was their age.
Yeah, it's okay.
Chill. It's okay. So yeah, that'll be next week. Where can they find us?
We are at WatchersPodNJ on Instagram. You can email us, WatchersPodNJ@gmail.com. I'm at AQ
And I am on Instagram, which is what you were referring to with your handle.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much.
Jodie_Mim, JODIE_MIM. Yeah, so reach out, send us your picks for what movie you would do next. We have a list and we have a plan, but out of that Yellow Jackets list, what are your favorites? What are the ones that either do or don't live up to your memory of them? Because that's kind of what we're revealing to ourselves here as we go through, which ones hold up, which ones don't. What it is that we still love about the movies from 20 years ago or 30. For some reason, I still think it's 20 years ago, and it's not. It's
Everything
30.
was 20 years ago.
Yeah. No, Clueless was 30 years ago, which is horrifying. But yeah, so we'll see you driving around in a Jeep.
On the freeway. Babe, we're on the freeway.
freeway.
Should I leave a note?